Okay, we are back. So I told y'all yesterday that today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're not going to be reading a chapter, and I know that y'all don't have the books at home, but I'm just going to kind of show y'all real quick. So in between each chapter, I'll show y'all hold on. In between each chapter in this book, if you can look, this might be backwards for y'all. You see there's chapter 1 and there's a little extra section. Chapter 2, a little extra section. So on Fridays, we're going to read those little extra sections. So they're only 1 page long, so it's super, super easy. But I'm going to read all those little extra sections that came after each of the chapters we read this week. So this week we read chapters 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3. So I'm going to read all of the little extra sections after those. So Gary Paulson, the author, he provided those sections in between the chapters so that he could give you more information about the topics and things discussed so far in the chapters that we've read. So some of you might not have any background knowledge. I mean, I know we've read Hatchet, so you kind of have a little bit of background knowledge of like the woods and how Brian's adventure through the woods was. But this is a whole new human. This is Samuel. And this is a whole new time period because this is talking about things that happened during the American Revolution, which we've already kind of touched on before we left school. So we have a little bit of background knowledge, but these in-between sections will kind of give us more details and kind of give us a better understanding of the book and what's going on. So you'll be able to understand the story a little bit more. So the information that was given after chapter 1 was information about communication. So you'll see in the Google Doc that I attached that it'll say communication, and then there will be, I think, 2 questions, and then we'll do the next one, which is called Frontier Life, and then there's 1 question, and then the last one is weapons, and then there's 1 question on that. So there's only ever going to be like 3 or 4 questions on these little in-between sections, just 1 or 2 questions each. So it's really not hard because, like I said, you can see right here, it's just, everything's backwards, sorry. It's just 1 page, so per in-between section. So it's super easy. And I've already said the word section 52 times. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is going to be communication. So there's 2 questions for this. If you want to go ahead and pull up the Google Docs so that you can answer them as we go, as I read. And you won't have to go back. Even though these are short, it'll just be a faster way of doing it. So once you pull up that Google Doc, if you need to pause and then pull up the Google Doc and then come back, you can. The first question for this section of titled Communication is, why was communication by ship better than communication by horse? That's interesting. And then the second question is, how was communication back then different than the ways that we communicate with other people today? So these will never be really hard questions. It kind of gives you an opportunity to compare the text to yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and read the other 2 questions as well. So when we get to frontier life, that word is frontier. When we get to frontier life, the question says, getting land was easy for families, but why was using the land so hard? And then the last one is about the section on weapons, and it says, what was something every frontier family needed? So I'm going to go ahead and go back to communication and read that. This was the little section after chapter 1. So communication. In the year 1776, which is the year that this book is taking place, so that's kind of like part of the setting. In the year 1776, the fastest form of travel for any distance over 30 or 40 miles was by ship. With steady wind, a sailing vessel could clock 100 or 200 miles a day for weeks on end. A horse could cover 30, maybe even 40 miles a day, although not for an extended period without breaking down. At best, coaches could do 100 miles in a 24-hour day by changing horses every 10 or 15 miles, but only if the roads were in good shape, which they almost never were. A man could walk 20 or 30 miles a day, faster for short periods, but always depending on the conditions of the land, weather, and footgear. 15 miles a day was standard. So there was no fast and dependable way to transmit information in those years. No telegraph, no telephone, no internet, no texting, no overnight delivery services. It might take 5 or 6 days for knowledge of an important event just to move 10 miles, carried by a traveler on foot. Settlements were 12 to 15 miles apart, and information was carried by hand from person to person on paper or, in most cases, shared by word of mouth. So, if it were me, I would go ahead and pause this video. So, I'll give you a second to pause it. And then answer the questions for communication. Answer those 2 questions. And then once you finish answering those questions, I would unpause the video. And then you'll listen to the section on frontier life. So go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, now we're back. Hopefully you've answered the questions on communication. If not, then that was just a really awkward pause for you, and you need to go ahead and pause it and go answer those questions and then come back. Okay, this section is on frontier life. So frontier is kind of like where they live. That's another place of saying like a grassland, a forest area, the forest. Frontier life. So remember the question for this, it says getting land was easy for families, but why was using the land so hard? Frontier life. The only thing that came easy to people of the frontier was land. A single family could own hundreds, even thousands of acres simply by claiming them. If getting the land was easily accomplished, using the land was a different matter. It had to be cleared of trees for farming. Some oaks were 5 or 6 feet in diameter, and each had to be chopped down by axe, cut into manageable sections, and hauled off. Then the stump was dug out of the ground, often with a handmade wooden shovel. One stump might take a week or 2 of hard work, and a piece of land could have tens of dozens of trees. If a family was lucky, they might find a clearing left by beavers, which log off an area and dam a creek to make a lake, rotting out all of the stumps. When the trees and food are gone, the beavers leave, the dam breaks down, and the water drains off, and there's a handy clearing left where the lake used to be. So go ahead and pause the video again and answer that one little question on frontier life, and then come back. Okay, hopefully you have answered the question on frontier life. If not, then pause the video, go to the Google Doc, answer the question on frontier life, and then come back and we will be reading the last section we're going to read for today, which is on weapons. So I know that this is a little bit different than reading the chapters, but it is really interesting information and it helps give us a little bit of a background. So I'm really enjoying reading it. Hopefully you are too. So we have already read the section on communication, on frontier life, and this last one is on weapons. So the question that you're going to be answering says, what was something every frontier family needed? So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and pull up that Google Doc. Weapons. A single rifle, something every frontier family needed, something that was an absolute necessity, might take a year or more and a year's wages to get from one of the rare gunsmiths, located perhaps miles away. This was the only weapon many of the rebels carried to battle against the British. The firearm issued to the British Army was called the Brown Bess musket. It was a smooth bore and fired a round ball of 75 caliber, approximately 3/4 of an inch in diameter, with a black powder charge, ignited by flint that pushed the ball at 700 or 800 feet per second when it left the muzzle. Modern rifles send the bullet out just at over 3,000 feet per second. So that kind of gave you a comparison. Back then, it was really impressive for the gun to push out the bullet or the ball at 700 or 800 feet per second, and guns today, or rifles today, send the bullet out at just over 3,000 feet per second. So obviously, they've come a long way. Because a round ball fired from a smooth bore is so pitifully inaccurate, the ball bounces off the side of the bore as it progresses down the barrel. The Brown Bess was really only good out to about 50 yards. The ball would vary in flight so widely that it was common for a soldier to aim at one man coming at him and hit another man 4 feet to the left or the right. With the Brown Bess, each British soldier was issued a bayonet. nearly 3 feet long, that twist locked into the end of the barrel and turned the empty weapon into kind of an attacking pike. Along with personal weapons, the British Army employed artillery, small field cannon, which fired plain round balls, exploding shells, and grape shot, scores of round musket balls packed down into the bore to make the cannon into something like a giant shotgun. Grape shot was so viciously effective against columns of marching men that its destruction would not be duplicated until the use of the rapid-fire machine gun in the First World War. Whole ranks of attacking men could be torn to pieces in a single shot, the musket ball passing through man after man, ripping them apart. So that's kind of like a cannonball. So that is the end of our reading for today. So be sure that you've answered those questions. Hopefully you enjoyed the virtual field trip from today too. I think those are going to be really fun each Friday. Be sure you answer the question on the virtual field trip as well. And again, make sure you're using complete sentences. So I will see you guys next week, and we will start on chapter 4 then. Y'all have a great weekend.